In a digital age of making music, it can be hard to get that same swing and groove that your favorite bands get from playing live instruments. With just a few simple techniques, you can create those same grooves and elevate your production skills. I've made a track that's going to help showcase these techniques, and to help you follow along with me easily, I'm going to add this project file as a free download down below. So without further ado, let's break down this track and teach you the fundamentals of swing and groove. So I've made this track for today's lesson, and I'm just going to play through each group one by one so you can hear exactly what they're doing. Starting off with the drums. I'll add the bass in. Now I'll add the music in. So as you can hear, everything's quite swung and there's a lot of groove to the track. So let's start by breaking down the drums. For anyone that doesn't understand what the word swing or groove means, or how do you actually get that effect, all you simply do is drag things off the grid. And if you see these lines, that's the grid that I'm talking about. If we go ahead and zoom into my snare drum here, we see that the snare's off the grid. This is where the snare would normally hit on the second beat here, 41.2. And we've got the snare slightly off, and then we've got the snare layer even slightly behind that as well. So this over time throughout the track is going to create that swing factor that you hear. Now you could just add this snare in and then duplicate that across the whole track along with a kick. But if you're hitting it in the same spot every time, it's not really humanizing, is it? Because the drummer's not going to be hitting it slightly off in that same spot every time. So I've taken the extra time to just put each of these kicks and snares in their own individual spot, slightly off throughout the track. And that's really helping with the variation and the humanization of it. So that's one way that you can get your tracks to swing, by manually placing them off the grid. But another way you can do it is by using Ableton's groove pull. Because I wanted the kick and the snare to vary throughout the track, I chose to draw these in manually, because once you apply a groove, it's going to apply it to the whole loop. So that's why in this track, for the kick and the snare, I've drawn them in manually. But if you go down to these hi-hats, I've got them drawn in as MIDI, and I haven't drawn them in manually. I've put in the groove pull here to the left. So that's the way that I go about it. My kick and snare, I use an audio, and I drag them off the grid manually. And for MIDI, I would always use Ableton's groove pull. And what I would suggest to do is to grab a reference track, get any song that you think sounds good, and have that playing on the top here, so you can reference between the two, and you can even zoom in to that reference track. You can have a look at when their drums are hitting, and you can essentially copy what they're doing and just learn how they got their drums to sound like they did. An absolute fundamental to getting a really solid groove is having a nice top end. Certain percussion instruments, like tambourines and shakers, are essential to solidifying your groove. I'll play the drums now that you've heard the kick and snare, and I'll add in the tops now. If you notice, I've got my tambourine to the right and the shaker to the left. That's because I've got three high-end instruments here. And if I've got all of them playing down the middle, it's going to clash in the frequencies a little bit. So by panning the tambourines to the right, the shaker to the left, it's giving the track some more space, and it's helping these hats come down the middle. Now let's walk through how to find the right groove for you. Go into your left here, and then you've got the groove tab that you can add your grooves in. And then you've just got to go into your groove pool by going View, Groove Pool. And then if you go into your left browser here, you'll see that you've got all your grooves in here. In Ableton 12, you can select the type of groove that you're after. I'd always recommend doing 16th swings. So I clicked on that to start with. Then it was simply about trial and error. I was playing the loop over and over, and I was just throwing in these grooves and trialing which one sounds best. Because my kick and snare are really off the grid, it needed the right groove, and it took a long time for me to actually find one that works. So if it does take a few times for you to get one that sounds good, or you think that something's wrong because nothing sounds good, there will be something eventually. So just keep throwing them in while your loop's playing and just wait till you hear one that sounds the best. To help narrow my search when I was looking, I clicked on this rock tab here. I thought the drums, because they're acoustic drums, I thought it would sound nice with the rock groove on. So I just threw these ones over here. And as this was playing, I'll just show you exactly what I did. Tested this one out. Definitely doesn't sound good. That one doesn't sound good either. Still doesn't sound good. Then you'll find that one where you instantly go, this one is the one that I was looking for. So try with that. Search up the 16th swing. Potentially you can try the genre that you're doing as well and just cycle through all of them until you find the one that you're after. The good thing about the groove is it does all the work for you. So if I click this commit button here, which is going to showcase what the groove's actually doing, you'll notice it's doing everything that I've talked about in the past about humanization. It's pushing things off the grid. It's changing the velocity of notes. And even better, it's changing the length of notes for me. So this is such a great way to fast track your process. Just simply turning on this groove here, and it's going to put everything in your beat on time with each other. I'm just going to play these hi-hats without the groove so you can see how I've drawn these hi-hats in. So I've created a bit of variation by having 3 different hats, but aside from that, I haven't changed anything off the grid. I haven't tried to get anything to swing at all. And so all I'm doing is turning on this groove now, and that's doing all the work for me. So that's why if I'm using MIDI, I'll always use that groove function. Just quickly, I'll just show you my tambourine MIDI clip. I've literally just got 4 notes in. I haven't changed the velocity, I haven't changed the placement, and I've got that groove turned on. So soloing the tambourine. Sounds exactly like that close hat, but it's just a tambourine playing. I'll turn that groove off. Such a difference that it makes, and it's an amazing feature within Ableton, this groove pull. So far, we've laid the foundation with this drum loop. We've found the groove that we're after, and that just makes life so much easier. All we have to do now is create our musical elements, turn on that groove, and it's going to fit in that same style as the rest of the track. So that's why in these tracks that are really swung, I love to start with the drums, spend extra time finding the right groove, placing things off where I think they want to hit. And that means I've done the hard work now and everything else is going to fall into place. So if I just go ahead and open this bass clip, you'll see I haven't adjusted the velocity, haven't adjusted the placements, but I've got this groove on. I'll turn the groove off, see what it's doing. So because the drums are off the grid, if I'm putting something on the grid, it's not going to be in sync. So that's why it's really essential that we have this groove on, or we're either manually drawing things off the grid to match the foundation that we've got with the drums. So now I'll just commit the bass to show you what it's doing by hitting this button. Just dragging that first note off ever so slightly. Then with the second one, changing the velocity. Here I've got a bit of a slap bass as well, creating a bit more of the groove as well. Solo that so you can hear what it's doing. Really subtle in the mix. And just like the rest, we'll have a look at this commit button, pushing it off the grid. I've been emphasizing on this whole time. So now that we've got our bass down, we've applied the same groove that we have to the drums. Solo both of them together. You've got a really nice swung track so far. This type of music is just all subjective though. So this type of groove I think sounds good to me, but for someone else it might not. So that's why I really want to emphasize that point about trusting your ears and just going with what you think sounds good, because there really are no rules in this type of music. Next, we'll start breaking down the musical elements. With this, I didn't really change how I would normally write stuff, because like I said, I just apply that groove pull to it. So I'm not really having to change and put the notes off myself, just turning on this groove and letting that do the work for me. So I'll just play through the musical group by itself. A really important point to make here is that because we're using 16 swings, we're swinging all the notes in between the beats. So this piano that's hitting on the beat every time, it's not going to be affected so much by the swing. So I'll commit this. As you can see, it rarely moved anything. And for me, that's why with pianos and stuff, I kind of like to draw the velocities in myself, adjust the randomness there. And I even push them off the grid like I've done with this B, just pushing it off the bit. And I think that's just like what I did with the kick and snare. I just did it to my own taste and what I think sounded good. It's the same with most of the other music elements. They're not getting swung too much, so I won't break down each of them individually, but I'll add them in one by one so you can hear the effect that they're doing. I think I've got this electric guitar, acoustic guitar, strings, so now I'll just play the track all together, and hopefully by hearing all the tracks individually, you can now hear the overall groove of the track. Being able to create an infectious groove is going to elevate your production quality significantly. By trusting your ears and finding the right groove to apply, you'll be making a track like this right away. As I mentioned at the start, I'll drop this project file down below so you can follow along with it. I use a lot of third-party plugins, so I'll make sure to freeze them so if you don't have them that you can still hear them. And I'll also bounce all the tracks out to audio so you have two different versions of it. And more importantly, you can visually see where I've placed things off the grid. Thank you so much for staying to the end of the video. I hope these techniques were easy to follow along with, and you now know the fundamentals of swing and groove. As always, if there's any questions, please drop them below. And if you wanted to check out my latest video, then just go ahead and click here. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.